Okay, so conflict resolution. Let's start with what is conflict. Before I get started, I want to talk about a concept that has saved a lot of relationships in counseling and coaching. I didn't put it in this presentation, but I want to talk to you about it. And I wish I could draw. In fact, I think I could. But let me get. I want you to. Let's see if I can do an SOP. See if I can find a clean sheet of paper. All right. So the first thing I want you to put on there is put a P, A, B. So it looks like this, P, A, B. And then underneath it, put a B, A, P. It looks like this. It's two PABs, but the arrows are going both ways. You see that? Okay. P like perceptions, A like attitudes, B like behaviors. Okay. B like behaviors. Okay. So Psych 101 teaches us, Psychology 101 teaches us that how we perceive the world, perceive risks, has a direct impact on our attitude or desire to behave. Okay. Now that's what Psych 101 teaches us. All right. So that's it. This is that perceptions goes drive attitudes, which drive behaviors. Everybody good with that? Everybody with me, right? Okay. Now, when you take Psych 400 or 500, start learning that if we remove choice from you, choice away, hey, then it is your behavior which will drive your attitude. Okay, this is like a 400, 500. Meaning, choice and get a behavior, it will change your attitude or your desire and your perception. Talked about it earlier with Freud. You'll be unhealthy because you'll live in a permanent state of conflict, or you'll just accept. Equation now. What? Attitude is everything. That's a cliche. At it, attitude drives the way you do things in this world and the way you perceive the world. See the connection? Okay. So now let me ask you this. What is the biggest influencer attitude? Well, those are what attitudes control. Attitudes control perception. What is the biggest? Perception and behavior. Attitude will drive perception. Drive how you perceive or what you attitude. Starts with the E. I want you on this. Put a little arrow that drives from the A or down here, expectation up. Attitude. So, it's not all the things you better. Ready? You're ready. I'm going to listen now. Ready? Family members. God. Science. Self. God. Car. Weather. There are three outcomes with your expectations. Right underneath. You're going to write three faces. Write a smiley face, big line, kind of like it looks like a small little smile, and then a fountain. These are the three faces. This is the three results of expectation. let's talk about your attitude when these expectations are like this, okay? So let's say it's the morning time, you go out, when it's time to go to work, car, and you turn your car on and it starts. You take the car and go, woohoo! See that? No. Only when the car is not supposed to start. Right, that's when it's, yeah. So your life is just meeting expectations, which your attitude for that day is, on that particular issue is, well, I'm going to perceive the world as is, and I'm going to behave as is, because, well, it met my expectations. Right, got it? Okay. Let's say that you go out on a car that's not supposed to start, and you turn the ignition and it starts. I mean, the world is going well today. Nothing's going to stop me now, man. Woo! I mean, you are living large. And you're happy. You perceive the world in a better way. You behave in the world a better way. Woohoo! Right? And then you go out one morning and you go to start the car and it doesn't start. Now, how do you perceive the world? How do you behave in the world? Sessions that I tell people is, if you want to find happiness, you're never going to find happiness outside. It'll always be inside of you. It always has been, it always will be. And the problem with a lot of people's unhappiness or misery or sadness in this world is because they have taken their expectations. All these relationships. One of the things that I love about working overseas in Pakistan hardest things for my friends. All right, I say to them, I'm not saying it in a nasty way. I really don't. Look at it. Look what we're capable of doing. Raping, murdering, killing. What do you think care about you over themselves? It doesn't work that way. That's a great expectation, but when it falls short, when someone attacks you or they gossip about you or they say something horrible about you, you can let it go by simply going, they've done it to perfect people in the past. I expected that. That's the way it is. Now, if you want to resolve conflict, that's one of the best ways you can resolve it. I wasn't expecting anything but that. And my friends will go, that's so mean that you said it. You think so little of me. No, it's not that I think so little of you. I just know human. You're not perfect. And I love you and you'll make mistakes. And that's just the way. And that saves relationships. It also saves time. If you don't want to accept that, if you don't want to accept that your anger is because of your expectations, I just simply saying, not having a conflict. Have a short disagreement, okay? But we both have the same interest. Kind of like when you have two young kids. So we have to recognize that conflict does. Safety officer. Look, let's recognize it. Lowers team morale. It increases absenteeism. We have an SOP for conflict. That SOP. We have an SOP for conflict. Here's the SOP for conflict. If you have conflict, you're going to stop working because that's what. Stop working. I'm going to separate both. And then I'm going to separate you. And once I separate you, after I separate you, what I'm going to do is I want you to state the problem individually. So they state the problem. So you get a little sheet. You can get a sheet of paper. And you just basically say, I've separated you, and now I'm giving this to you, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes to fill it out. So they fill it out. What's the problem? Acknowledge what your role is in the conflict. After they acknowledge the role in the conflict, ask them what they're wanting specific to the conflict. What is stopping them from getting it? Are you willing to resolve this conflict? And what do you predict the outcome of this conflict would be? And then after you fill that out, you ask them, well, how are we going to resolve this? And what is it going to take? And meet with the individual separately when appropriate, meet together if they can get together and document an agreement and get a person assigned. Do you know when they go back into the lab? When the conflict's resolved. It's that simple. If you guys can't work together, then both of you are out. That's negative reinforcement, by the way. I'm not saying that you can't work. I'm just saying you're not going to work in my lab while you're in conflict. Period. We're going to deal with it. Now, a lot of people think conflict is, it is a random occurrence. It isn't. We know. We talked about Carl Jung earlier. He is a social psychologist. He says conflict's very predictable. It happens. There are several things in the workplace that we fight about. Several things. The leadership styles, that's my job. That's not your job. Now you're impeding it, or you're telling me to do your job and it's not my. I mean, there's all sorts of things that people get in conflicts for. Again, I expect conflict. Conflict's going to occur. Okay, tell me in history when conflict hasn't occurred. Conflict occurs between cultures, within cultures, in neighborhoods, in homes. It happens. So let's be prepared for it. Let's not deny it. Let's say, okay, it's going to happen. So let's get a game plan for it. One of the things and one of the biggest reasons for conflict is personality. And many of you attended the personality talk, correct? So you guys have a little flavor of this. But when you look at personality types, there are conflicts that occur, okay, that talk. And I can't. When you look at sensory individuals and intuitive individuals, there's conflict. Sensory people like things the way they are, like the way they've always been. Intuitives always want to change. They want to do new things, and they have conflict there because what an E and an I will look at, an E will look at an I like, well, you're passive aggressive. An I is going to look at an E like you're just loud and boisterous. When you look at an S and an S is going to, an N is going to say you're a very traditionalist. You don't like to change. Whereas a S is going to look at an intuitive like you're a dreamer. You're like you're just in theory and dreaming. A thinker and a feeler will judge each other. A feeler will say, you're ice cold. You don't have a heart. That's what they'll say to a thinker. And a thinker will say to a feeler, you're emotional and unpredictable, irrational, so to speak. And the judger and the judger will say, the perceiver is disorganized. They're all over the place. Whereas a perceiver will say to the judger, they're a tyrant. They just want everybody to do things their way. There is conflict that occurs in personalities all the time. That's why, I really, truly recommend becoming a big understander of personality, because majority of conflict can be avoided. Not fighting with the person. You're having an issue with their person. Person can be a beautiful person. Truly, truly. Like when you say, I don't like this person. If you ever hear anybody say that, if you have the moment to sit down and go, hey, I heard that you said you don't like him. If you really listen, is it really the reason? Like, I don't like him because they're a serial killer. I mean, seriously, usually the reasons are things that well, they said something bad about me. And you say, hold on one sec. No one in your life that you like has ever said anything bad about you? If you really sit down and listen to it, there is no sound reason. It's just there's something about the person that really pisses me off. What is it? The way they talk, how much they talk. They're too emotional. They're too structured for me. These are things that are personalities. Things they can't change. And if you can accept them and realize, well, this is the way this person is, and asking them to be something they're not is too difficult. It's going to be too hard for them. Then it builds your sense of tolerance. Does that make sense? Okay. When you look at conflict and personalities, which we talked about earlier, look at TP. I'll let you read this. I'm not going to read this. But when you look at these personalities, TPs and tolerance of conflict is much higher than most. Remember TPs? We were talking about. I talked about the IP being the golden retriever. TJs they may be stubborn. TJs versus the TPs. Remember, the TPs are more accommodating. TJs may be stubborn. They believe they're right. And when you look at FPs, they dislike conflicts. They typically will run away from it. Whereas the FJs will view conflict. They typically will engage, but they just don't like it. They know it's negative. TP or TJs welcome it. TJs like arguing with it because they see it as a challenge, like you're processing things. But TJs kind of like it. FJs look at it as a negative experience. IPs really try and run away from it. The reality is that people are different and perceive things differently. Happens. So if we know conflict happens, we know that we have different people with different personalities. We know that they're going to handle conflict completely different. It would be best for you to begin to try and prevent it, to prime it. So how could we prime people for conflict? First and foremost, manage your expectations. Conflict's going to happen. As sure as science happens, conflict. Once we agree that conflict is going to happen, we should then agree that we're not going to blame people. We're going to look at what is causing the conflict. Okay? Maybe somebody doesn't understand what is expected of them. Maybe they don't, maybe there's some type of confusion, but we're going to look at what is causing conflict. We're going to, I don't think promote, I think we're going to expect open, direct, and respectful communication. Now, like I said, I have served on several cases where like I said, I'm a certified neutral in Georgia. What that means is that the courts can call on me to bring in two parties who are fighting, and I will mitigate, before it goes to court, I can mitigate the situation. Now, I have a very good record. But I have a very good record simply because I come in and I say exactly what I've been talking to all of you about. First, let's talk about expectations. If you expect to get everything you want when you're dealing with another person, that expectation, that other person's never going to just roll over and go, well, sure, just give everything you want. No, let's first talk about expectations. You're not going to get everything you want, and neither is that person. So once you get that, people understand, okay, now that's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm going to expect you to be respectful, not to be destructive of this. And here's why. If we don't mitigate this as two people, it's going to go to a leader, usually a judge, but it's going to go to a leader who is going to remove all the control from you. Whatever that leader says is what's going to happen. And you will have no control. Right now, if we're dealing with this conflict, you have complete control. You can negotiate, you can talk, you can be respectful. But if we send this to the leader's going to make a decision and there will be no negotiation. You lose all control. So I set that up. So let's be respectful, let's be open, and let's try to solve it between ourselves, because if it has to go up, then you'll lose all control. Okay? And the next point, we don't serve ourselves, we serve the mission of the organization. Remind people this is not about them. It's not about their egos. This is about the science and what's best for the science. Backbiting and gossip. Number one cause of conflict. People gossiping. Backbiting each other. So many problems can be stopped if you just say a rule. And the rule can be very clear when they come in. We don't talk about people in this life. And that means that's what the older scientists say. If a younger scientist starts to talk about somebody or starts to complain, just like what happened with what you were describing, the older scientists who are more seasoned in that lab say, in this lab, we don't do that. That doesn't happen here. We don't talk about each other. You have something nice to say, you say it. If it's negative, you don't say anything. You talk to the leader if you want to say it. One of the best quotes in a movie is in Saving Private Ryan. When the enlisted guy says, hey, Captain, why don't we hear you complaining? And the captain goes, it's not my job to complain down to you. My job is to complain up. And that's the way it goes. That's it. I go upward. I don't go down. And the same thing goes with gossip. You have a complaint, you go to the PI. There's no need to talk to people around you. All you do is you just perpetuate issues, okay? No backbiting or gossip. These are rules. We understand personality differences. You have to understand them. When someone comes in a lab, you're going to have to understand that some people are going to be quirky. They really are. Some will be out and loud and literally bother you. Just being loud, their voice will bother you. I'm an extrovert, and there are people who have voices that bother me. Sometimes their voice will bother you. Sometimes they'll make clicking noise. Sometimes there's all sorts of things that people do that bother you, that really do. I mean, and you're just going to have to, understand that's them. Yeah, that's them. Oh, man, one of the biggest conflicts, the biggest ones that I had, a gentleman cooking fish in a microwave. Oh, it was so big. You have no idea. I mean, it was so. Imagine traveling halfway around the country just to go deal with a conflict like that. It was huge. The whole department was just irate. Every day the fish would be cooked, and every day it caused pandemonium, to the point where the dean was like, we cannot deal with this anymore. We cannot deal with it. People were being called racists and bigots and this, and it was just like, it can't, and it got so out of control when all you needed to do was make a room negative pressure, which you could easily do with the facility staff, and put a microwave in a negative pressure room where the fish would be cooked. It took 2 seconds. It was done. There was no issue that needed to be done. Now what you had to do was recover from it. Because now, because of the pain of the conflict, there were hurt feelings. We hire the right people for the job. You can sometimes prevent conflict by making sure you hire the right people. That's so important. So important. If you hire the wrong people, people that have clashes with other people, is going to be a problem. And we set people up to succeed, not fail. Someone fails, you see the worst. They're not a happy person. And that sometimes causes conflict. Expectations can be established. The workforce can be primed. That means you do this now. When they come in the door, part of the onboarding process, in my opinion, is you're sitting down and you're saying, this is how we deal with conflict. I'm going to be, hopefully one day in my life, I'm going to be a foster parent. I'd love to be. I'm in training. And we were doing the training classes. And I said, hey, do you ever prime the kids to come in for conflict? And the director says, yes, look at chapter 12. In chapter 12, as a kid comes in, you say, this is how we deal with conflict. Sit down, respectful. And it's funny because from day one, I've always had an SOP for spanking. I believe in spanking my children. I haven't spanked them very often. But my protocol is very clear. I will never spank when I'm angry or upset. I will simply say, it's time for you to go. About the spanking you're receiving. I will sit down and I will watch a TV show like my dad. And then I will walk upstairs and I will spank my child. Completely unemotional. That is my protocol. That is the way I'll do it. And that's the way I recommend any parent do it because I don't want you to be emotional when you touch your child. Period. And the reality is that you have to have these. So you prime them. You simply say, in this lab, this is the way we're going to do it. Okay? It's a very serious issue because we need you to focus on your work. Don't want conflict to be the priority. Preparing for conflict. Again, we have an SOP. I strongly recommend that you write an SOP so you know exactly what you're going to do when it happens. We're ready for it. When it happens, we're ready. We got a game plan. We're going to deal with it. It's going to be done. And it's really funny because, like, so many people listen to this talk. So many people. Now, I get one or two. I'll give you a class. When I was a sophomore in college, I got kicked out. Failed out academically. 1.99 I went to the got my coat on. I drove down, walked right past the secretary of the psychology department at the time, right into the dean's office. Literally fell on my knees. I said, please give me a second. Why do you think you deserve a second? I lost my way. Attorney, I lost my way. Please give me. The funny part was that she gave me a second chance. Very, very interesting. I worked all summer. She never told me. And then the day before school started, I was wondering if I really called me in, and that's how I got into public health. Sean, I see you want to teach education, but you're not doing well in those classes. This is a very hard class. Can you tell me what the incubation period for chlamydia is? And I said, well, are you a man or a woman? I mean, that's literally, and she said, well, I'm a woman. I said, well, it varies. Sometimes by the time you find out, you could be sterile. I don't know, it just sticks. And she goes, and that's is when you when I graduated and I was given that award for growth and achievement. She said to me, Sean, you didn't know this, even though you worked all summer. I accepted you back in school the moment that you said that you had lost your way. That's when it was over. You admitted and you acknowledged that you way. Not a teacher's fault. You owned it. When we get to conflict and get to me sharing all these lessons, some people, most people don't listen. Some people do. And then they call and they go, my God, you changed. Like just focusing on culture or just focusing on this issue changed my whole life. Changed my whole life. Thank you. Thank you so much. I call that dean still to this day. I talked to her just last week. I give her flowers every year. Life. She reminds me every year. You. Same goes with all of you. If you choose to listen to this, it causes a change. It's not because of what I do. You chose to make it. I guarantee you, I've had several calls from people who will make conflict the center of their lab. They literally do. They make conflict resolution the center of their lab. They say, listen, I'm a selfish PI. They say flat out to every student, I am selfish. The student goes, they say, I don't want anything but science done in this lab. There'll be nothing but good science. And they make it all about that. And the students love it. And they argue it. They'll tell each other, no, don't fight in here. He's going to get mad if you fight in here. He's going to get mad. And he comes in, I am a selfish PI. This is about science. This has nothing to do with your personal stuff. Has nothing. This is science. And he's a teddy bear. He's one of those guys that would hug you in. But he really says, my lab is science, nothing more. And he has made conflict the center of his lab. There will be no conflict between any of them. If you do, you don't have to come back. And he's gotten rid of grad students who are difficult. He says, you're out. Why? You don't get along with people. You're out. No, I'll get along. I'll get along. It may be too late at that point. So again, be ready for it. A process for resolving conflict can be developed. The goal is collaboration, fixing the what and not the who. We can do, what can we do to protect staff during conflict? And this is how we protect them. First and foremost, we quickly separate conflict from our safety, responsibility, and scientific integrity. Quickly. Immediately pull the conflict away from science. Remind people that this has nothing to do with science. We are not conflicted about science. We are not conflicted about safety. We are two people that are having a conflict. Pull it immediately away. Second, respect all positions. There is no right or wrong. That's one of the things that I learned as a Georgia neutral. If I go into that room and I am an advocate for both people, they love that. And can you tell people no and still serve them? Absolutely. What would you say to somebody who comes into Burger King and asks for a Big Mac? What would you say? If you're serving them, you're not saying you're at the wrong place. What would you say if you wanted to serve somebody who came into Burger King and said, I want a Big Mac? How would you serve them? You could say, we don't serve the Big Mac. We have things like the Big Mac. And if the person says, no, I don't want that. I want a Big Mac. What would you say? But you wanted to serve them. What would you say if you wanted to serve them? I can call you an Uber. I could call you a taxi, sir, if that's what it'll take. I mean, I can give you, like you said, I got a coupon. I'll give you that. I can do it. Service doesn't mean you're saying yes. It just means you're continuing to serve through the process. So when you say no, it doesn't mean you're saying, sucks to be you. That's not empathy. Empathy isn't sucks to be you. That's saying I'm sorry. Sorry says sorry. That sucks to be you. Empathy is I'm trying to put myself in your position. I'm understanding that you want a Big Mac and we don't serve that. So what would I want in your shoes? Maybe a ride, maybe some way, somehow I get there. I don't know, but I'm going to try my best to serve you. You're demonstrating empathy with everything. There is no right or wrong. There is no side taken. Okay. To identify discrepancy between what is wanted and what is being done. So I love in the mediation rooms when I'm mediating conflicts. All of this what you're wanting, and it's funny, the response. No, I've never wanted this. Well, we don't have to do this. We don't have to keep doing it. This could be done right now. You get to decide what you want to do. Most people don't want to fight. Most people don't want to have conflict. And I will tell you, the PI that I was referring to that did the conflict thing, which worked out beautifully, he doesn't deal with that issue. If he senses that somebody likes to fight, they're gone. He doesn't even deal with it. They're out. He cuts them out right away. His group of scientists, by the way, are phenomenal. They all love his lab because he does not tolerate that. He doesn't tolerate it. And it's okay if they don't like each other, but in the lab, they'll respect it. And it's important. So when you're in a conflict, you say, is this something? We got on here. Right. Manage expectations appropriately. Tell people, look, this is what's going to happen, and manage them appropriately. If you expect to come back into the lab, this conflict will be resolved. I'm not going to let you work until it is. It's just that simple. We're not going to deal with it. This conflict takes priority over science and safety, because if it doesn't, then all of a sudden you'll be in the lab and your conflict will take care of all science. And we're not going to do this. We're stopping it. We're dealing with your conflict. And then you come back. Be open and honest about what you can and cannot do, and then focus on what is being or what can be done versus what cannot be done. That's another big thing during conflict. What can you do? Don't focus on what. Don't say we won't do this or we're going to stop doing this. Say this is what we'll start doing, and come to that agreement. So, if you're looking at personalities and you're a P, what I guess what I'm trying to say here is we need an approach that addresses all personalities. All of them. And so this approach does. The first thing you do is you create space. When you create space, it means you're bringing everybody together. And this is something that a P likes. P likes flexibility and space. Then, stage 2 is for the thinker and the feeler. This is where you start to add value. You start talking about a deeper appreciation, knowledge, the contribution of our natural preferences. Those are and those from a shift everything T and F. And then stage 3 is where you seek closure. This is a J. We are not going to end this mitigation or this conflict resolution aspect until we have closure here. And by the way, if the two people are supposed to work together in the future, closure should always be together. Always. So like if I am handling or mitigating a divorce, if they're parents, I will always tell them part of my agreement is you must both come in together for the kids. You will not end this mitigation successfully unless you both come together, because it's for your children. And if they can't agree with that, then I won't be their neutral. They can start apart, and they usually do. But when they finally come to the end, they have to. Why? Because they're going to have to be together in raising the kids. If that's part of the deal, they're going to have to be together. So I will always end conflict resolution together. So if there are two people working together, always end it together, because they're going to have to work together. If they're not, if there's some people that don't, then you don't have to do that. You deal with the conflict, let them stay separate, come up with an agreement, both sign it, gone. But make sure whatever they assign, that becomes gold. That is golden. All right. In that conflict I was talking about with the fish, the signed agreement was they would not cook fish with exception to one microwave in that one area. That was it. And everybody was cool. And everybody was fine, everybody was happy, and they got everything that they wanted. The only thing that was left was the pain. Extended conflict. Extended. For months, it was conflict. Didn't have to be that way. Okay? All right. Core function issues. If you look at people by core functions, and we talked about this, STs, you do have an ST. They're bottom line people. They want you rational objectives. Personal, they don't want to be emotional or rational, or they don't want you to get aggressive. Fs. Do we have any SFs? I don't know if we have any SFs. These are individuals, they want you to talk directly, rationally, calmly. Don't not listen to them. They're very upset. And just so you know, SFs, from a personality standpoint, they are the elephants. What I mean by that is, they are the ones that have a memory of an elephant. You talk about holding grudges, SFs will hold grudges forever. If you hurt them or you attack them and you attack their values, they will not forgive you. They will remember it forever. So SFs are very, very hard to gain trust back. They're very giving people, and they'll give their own happiness for yours. But if you hurt them, they don't let that go. Okay? NTs, they're system spirit. They want logic and want to get personal, very similar to the SD. Don't underuse logic and overkill emotion. And don't shut down. INTs have a big problem with stonewalling. Like if you stonewall them and you just sit there and all of a sudden you're quiet, it's gonna really bother an NT because NTs are problem solvers. Can't solve this problem if you're just gonna be quiet. Just so you know, from a counseling standpoint, or even from a mediation standpoint, if I identify that a client is an NT, beautiful. All I'll do is I'll say, excuse me, can you do me a favor? I want you to think about a solution that'll work for you. And then you just leave them. NTs solve their own problems. Counseling, they were always the best. They would come in, and if I identified them as an NT, I'd be like, hold on, here, let me do you, I'm going to have you come back in a week. And between now and then, I want you to try and solve your problem. Give me 3 or 4 solutions. They come back with their solutions that work. So NTs always have the ability of solving their problems. Sometimes they just NF, calm and listen, express your feelings in a calm time. Don't yell or attack their values or beliefs. That will turn it NF off. Again, must prepare and protect your organization when conflict occurs. What can you do moving forward? Number 1, like I started out with, I call it pleasant disappointment. Disappointment has many faces. Sadness, anger, you can get angry, sad, isolated. There's all sorts of faces of disappointment. Disappointment, by the way, is that sad face when we started. When your expectations are not met, it goes into a sad phase. Now, here's where it gets unhealthy. And it's sad because majority of Americans, over 50% now, are facing depression and anxiety issues, which is really sad because I'll tell you what's happening. They live in what we call a permanent state of disappointment. What I mean by that is extended sadness leads to depression. Meaning when you look at chronic sadness, it's depression. You look at chronic anger, it's violence. When you look at chronic isolation, you're really looking at suicidal tendencies. Okay? And when you look at expectations, you have a choice. Listen, you can manage your expectations specific to humans, or you can just try and say that, well, humans should live up to my expectations. And if you do that, you'll ruin relationships. You'll also cause yourself so much more grief than you need to have. Manage your expectations, certainly specific. They are going to disappoint. They're going to hurt you. You're going to wonder some days why you even like it. You know what? It's not going to be a good day for everybody. I mean, we all know what the honeymoon phase is. The honeymoon phase is you do everything perfect. I love everything. And then after that, it's like, what the hell did I even like you for? Manage your expectations. Second, understand that there are differences in personality preferences. People are different. Some are going to be structured. Some are going to be disorganized. It's going to drive you crazy. Some will show up on time. Some will be late. Some will like to talk a lot. Some will like to listen. Some will like change constantly, and some will just be happy with what is. And some will be very logical and rational, and some will be very emotional and values-driven. That's just people. You're not going to change them. Like I said, it was one of the scariest things I saw was my dad starting to cry, and I thought, why are you crying? And he said, I've been trying to change your mom for 25 years. And this is her. And it's like, I finally get that asking her to change this would be like asking me to change this. And it wouldn't be possible because it's who I am. Like I said, try and tell me to shut up. It's hard. Implement strategies to prevent and minimize the likelihood of conflict. Draw attention to it right away. Just listen, we know conflict exists. We're going to identify and deal with it. And we don't want it in this lab. That's it. Call, reference, point to it. Make people sensitive. Develop and implement a strategic plan for when conflict occurs. Okay, so you have an SOP. I've given you an example of one. Ensure the protection of both science and safety when conflict occurs. Listen, that's what I love about this one PI that really took this to heart. It's like, look, you know what? I see conflict. And the PI shared with me that in the past, conflict had caused problems, big problems in his lab. both the science, his reputation. And so he wasn't going to deal with it anymore. He was fed up. And when he heard this lecture, he's like, I think you were sent. He said, I think you were sent by God. He goes, I don't believe in God. And I said, why is that? And he says, because I need this. And so he did. He took it. And he's like, I'm not dealing with, and he did exactly this. He said, that's it. Science and safety matters in this lab. Your conflict doesn't. And so if you can't get along, you're out until you get along. That's it. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And it was perfect. And it's like I said, he's a teddy bear. He's very much a loving and supporting of his staff, but he does not tolerate conflict. He will not tolerate it. He's already been burned by it. Customized conflict resolution approaches to deal with different people who have different approaches. Okay. Remember, it's not a one size fits all. And an aim for collaborative, productive, and beneficial outcomes of all conflict. Remember, there's something to be gained, something to learn by that conflict. But especially remember this: your